The morning sun reflected off the polished windows of the bustling airport, a place where stories of departure and reunion intersected every minute. Crowds shuffled through security lines, dragging luggage, clutching passports, or rushing with coffee in hand. Among them was 19-year-old Amara Johnson, a bright-eyed young black woman with dreams bigger than the suitcase she carried. Today was supposed to mark the beginning of something extraordinary, her first international trip alone, a chance to prove to herself and her family that she was ready to navigate the world on her own terms. Amara wore her confidence lightly, in the way she moved with purpose yet paused often to take in the details of her surroundings. She had always been a people watcher, fascinated by how strangers crossed paths for only a moment before scattering like leaves in the wind. Her mother had dropped her off at the curbside only an hour before, hugging her tight and whispering words of encouragement. "You are meant for great things, Amara. Don't let anyone make you feel small." Those words lingered in her heart as she walked toward the gate where her plane awaited. She had saved for this trip for nearly 2 years, working part-time jobs after school, babysitting on weekends, and even selling her artwork online. Paris was the dream destination, the place she had imagined since she was a little girl flipping through glossy travel magazines in the library. She wasn't just visiting for fun. She was attending a young entrepreneurs conference, where she had been chosen to showcase her project, a startup idea blending technology and social justice. Amara knew she was one of the youngest selected, and one of the few black women, but she was determined to shine. The gate was crowded, and she found herself standing in line behind business travelers with sleek laptops, families with restless toddlers, and honeymooners holding hands. She kept her boarding pass tucked inside her passport and clutched her tote bag close, her heart pounding with excitement. She thought of how proud her father would have been to see her traveling so far. He had always told her that airplanes were symbols of freedom, proof that nothing could keep someone grounded forever. When boarding was finally announced, Amara stepped forward with a smile. The flight attendant at the gate barely glanced at her documents before scanning them and waving her through. She walked down the jet bridge, her sneakers squeaking softly against the floor, her chest swelling with the anticipation of flight. She found her seat near the middle of the plane, tucked her carry-on carefully into the overhead bin, and slid into her seat by the window. She could already picture the clouds she would soon be floating above. It should have been simple. But things rarely were. Moments later, a flight attendant approached her row. She was tall, with perfectly styled hair and a crisp uniform that seemed designed to command authority. Her name tag read, Ms. Collins. Her eyes swept over Amara with a look that felt less like acknowledgement and more like judgment. "Excuse me, Ms. Collins said, her voice sharp but polite enough to carry authority. "Are you in the correct seat?" Amara blinked, surprised. She glanced at her boarding pass and then at the seat number overhead. "Yes," she replied softly, holding out the ticket for the attendant to see. "This is my seat." Ms. Collins didn't take the ticket. Instead, she pursed her lips and leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice but not softening it. "We've had issues before with passengers sitting in the wrong section. This area is reserved." Amara's brows furrowed. "Reserved? My boarding pass says 17A. That's this seat." The attendant finally snatched the ticket, scanning it quickly, then returned it with a clipped nod. "Fine," she said, though the edge in her tone suggested it wasn't fine at all. "Just follow the rules." With that, she walked away, but not before casting one last scrutinizing look at Amara, as though silently warning her not to cause trouble. Amara tried to shake it off, reminding herself of her mother's words. "Don't let anyone make you feel small." Still, unease prickled in her chest. She had flown before, though never internationally, and she knew this wasn't standard treatment. She decided to ignore it, distracting herself by pulling out her notebook to jot down ideas for her presentation in Paris. But the incident didn't end there. 15 minutes later, as the last passengers were still boarding, Ms. Collins returned. This time, her expression was tighter, her jaw set as though she had already made up her mind. She stopped directly in front of Amara, blocking the aisle. "I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things and step off the plane," she said. Amara froze. "What? Why?" "There's been a complaint, Ms. Collins replied quickly. "You're making other passengers uncomfortable. We can't have disruptions on this flight." The words struck like a slap. Uncomfortable. Amara hadn't spoken to anyone except the attendant. She looked around, but the passengers nearby avoided her eyes, staring at their phones or pretending not to notice. "I haven't done anything," Amara said, her voice trembling but firm. "I've just been sitting here." Ms. Collins' lips curled into a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ma'am, I'm not going to argue with you. If you refuse to comply, security will escort you off. It's your choice." Amara's chest tightened, humiliation washing over her in hot waves. People were watching now, whispering to each other, their gazes heavy on her as though she were suddenly the center of a spectacle she hadn't signed up for. She thought of her presentation, her dreams, the ticket she had paid for with her own hard work. To be cast out now, without cause, felt like more than an inconvenience. It felt like erasure, a deliberate attempt to remind her of her place. She wanted to fight, to protest, to shout the truth so loudly that no one could deny it. But something inside her told her that in this moment, resistance would only feed the narrative being painted about her. She took a shaky breath, gathered her belongings, and stood up. Her legs wobbled as she walked down the aisle under the weight of dozens of curious stares. The shame followed her all the way off the plane, down the jet bridge, and back into the terminal where the hum of airport life seemed suddenly hostile. She sank into an empty chair near the gate, burying her face in her hands. She wasn't just angry, she was devastated. How could something she had dreamed of for so long be ripped away so easily, and for no reason other than prejudice? But Amara was not someone who stayed broken for long. Beneath the sorrow, a spark of determination began to burn. Her mother's voice echoed again in her mind. "You are meant for great things. Don't let anyone make you feel small." She sat up straight, wiped her tears, and took out her phone. If they thought they could silence her, they were wrong. She opened her camera, hit record, and began to speak. Her voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of her pain and truth. She told the world what had just happened, that she had been kicked off a plane without cause, that she had been humiliated simply for existing in a space she had every right to occupy. She shared her boarding pass, her ticket, every detail that proved her story. And then she uploaded the video to her social media accounts, where her modest following of friends and classmates quickly began to share it. What Amara didn't know was that within minutes, her story would ignite a fire that no airline could ignore.